Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're continuing our discussion of one of the most well-known resorts on the entire West Coast, Heavenly. With Heavenly, there's a lot to talk about, so this Insider's Guide is split into 4 parts. In this part, we'll go over the entire Nevada side except for Mott and Killebrew Canyon. If you haven't already, go check out Part A to get some great background on Heavenly. So with that, let's continue in Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Heavenly. Let's start off with Boulder. Boulder is a decent beginner area. Boulder Bowl has more of an S shape, unlike its relatively straight depiction on the trail map. Boulder Bowl is the only beginner run in the area, and Boulder is not directly connected to any of the other beginner areas. The moral of the story is just honestly don't come to Heavenly for beginner terrain. I also wouldn't really recommend starting your day at the Boulder base unless the Stagecoach base has filled up. The North Bowl lift was upgraded to a high-speed quad for the 2023 ski season, although it rarely sees any traffic. Upper North Bowl is a fun cruiser, and $100 Saddle is a fun, lightly graded intermediate run. Go past the bottom terminal of Olympic Express to access North Bowl, the signature run in this pod. North Bowl is a fun enough mogul run that I don't see too many people do. I believe Boulder Chute is groomed fairly regularly, but don't quote me on that. Stagecoach is the main pod in the lower half of the Nevada side and is home to a bunch of really enjoyable intermediate cruisers and bump runs. Despite being so low on the mountain, I'm always surprised just how good the snow is over here since this area doesn't get a lot of traffic past the first few hours of the day. Both Mineshaft and Comstock are pretty much always left ungroomed, and they both lead directly to the Galaxy pod unless you take the flat Nevada trail back to Stagecoach. Note that Mineshaft is a bit steeper than your typical blue run. Stagecoach and Lower Stagecoach are always groomed and are the signature lines in this pod. There are also a few really fun rollers to catch air on. Emily's run is pretty much always left ungroomed, although you can easily get back to the groomed Stagecoach run if you find yourself struggling since the two are right next to each other. The Nevada Trail takes you all the way back to the Boulder base, so follow it if you wish to get back there. If you accidentally take the Nevada Trail to Boulder, you can use the Stagecoach return trail to get back to Stagecoach. Pepe's is a very flat and annoying catwalk that you take to the top of North Bowl or to get to the bottom of the Dipper Comet pod. For whatever reason, when you turn this one corner, the wind will pick up like crazy, even on a bluebird day, so be ready for that. From Pepe's, you can take Upper North Bowl down the lower half of Olympic downhill. Like all the other lower mountain glade runs at the resort, Stagecoach Woods can either be home to some amazing or extremely variable snow. The glades here aren't too special compared to some of the glades further up the mountain. Moving towards Olympic Express, this pod is home to some decent intermediate cruisers and some of the best tree terrain at the resort. The Pines is one of the only marked intermediate glades at the resort, but it's still one of the best. If you're an intermediate skier looking to try your first glade run, this is 100% the place to do so. The trees are spaced really nicely and the pitch is very mild. Although they require both the North Bowl and Olympic lift to lap, Bohemian Grove, Nevada Woods, and the Burn are a trio of locals' favorites. Almost no one even seems to realize that these runs exist, and they're a bit confusing to get to, so the snow here is pretty much always good. To access these runs, ski the Pines and stay as high skiers left as you can. Bohemian Grove is the first glade area you'll come to, and while it gets a bit more track than either Nevada Woods or the Burn, it's still home to some great snow. By the time you get over to Nevada Woods, the snow will become fantastic, especially if there's been a recent dump. The Burn is an absolute gem of a run. It's very out of the way and unintuitive to reach, but if you do get there, you'll find one of the most unique runs at Heavenly. The Burn was at the site of a fire, and so the trees have been thinned out a good bit. There can be plenty of stumps hidden about, so just watch out for your bases. It's definitely a bit annoying to lap the Burn and the other glade runs in this area, but if you want to get away from the crowds, this is the place to be. The upper part of Olympic downhill is the signature groomed cruiser in the Olympic pod and, like all the other intermediate runs in this part of the mountain, maintains its pitch really nicely. Even though it's a bit counterintuitive, the snow quality here tends to be a bit worse than the lower elevation Stagecoach pod due to wind exposure. Cloud 9 is a relatively hidden run that not too many people end up doing. I believe this run is groomed most of the time, but don't quote me on that. This brings us to the absolute mess that is the runs between Olympic and Comet. This part of the trail map is pretty confusing, and it honestly won't make full sense until you're there in person, but I'll do my best to talk about it. Von Schmidt is a very flat catwalk that you can take to go from Olympic to the bottom of Tamarack and the top of the gondola. If you keep following Von Schmidt, you'll eventually get to the bottom part of California Trail. However, since this would require some extremely lengthy and brutal catwalking, I highly recommend just taking Tamarack Express up one more time and skiing down this upper section of the California Trail to get some speed. Both Ponderosa and Bonanza are two ungroomed intermediate trails that have pretty variable snow due to their eastern exposure. They both lead directly to the bottom of Dipper and Comet. However, Pepe's is still the primary way that people get from Lower Nevada to Dipper and Comet. Silver Spur is a catwalk that leads from the top of the Big Easy Lift to the lower half of Bonanza and Crossover. We'll talk more about the logistics of getting to Crossover in a bit, but for now know that it's how you get from the Comet Lift to Olympic and the rest of Lower Nevada. It's also only one of 3 ways to get to Lower Nevada in general. Finally, moving back to arguably the single most infuriating pot on the mountain, Galaxy. Galaxy services some solid lower intermediate terrain on the mountain. However, I cannot in good faith recommend this lift to anyone since it's a nearly 15-minute lift ride, without stops of course. During weekdays, it's not uncommon for Heavenly to not open this pod at all since nobody really bothers to come here. This is not really a place worth checking out at Heavenly if you only have a few days here, but we'll talk about it anyway. I mentioned earlier that Mineshaft and Comstock are the only 2 trails that lead from Stagecoach to the bottom of Galaxy. These are definitely the 2 toughest trails in the Galaxy pod, although the upper parts are only accessible from Stagecoach. Directly in between Mineshaft and Comstock are the unmarked gated Galaxy Glades. The Galaxy Glades are some really great intermediate glades that can be accessed through 3 gates. Gate X and Gate Y are located in between Mineshaft and Comstock. I believe Gate Z is located just beyond Comstock, but don't quote me on this. This terrain is pretty mild and seldom open, but if you see the gates open, it could be worth checking out. Galaxy is the signature run in this area and is a pretty fun low-angle cruiser. Galaxy Line is ungroomed and isn't anything that special. Outlaw is probably the most mellow run in this pod, arguably being similar in difficulty to greens like Maggie's. Perimeter is probably my favorite run in the Galaxy pod as it's very remote and long. Hardly anyone comes back here, so it really feels like you're just skiing through the woods by yourself. Again, the terrain here isn't that bad. However, it's really not worth the agonizing lift ride to get out of here. From the top of Galaxy, if you want to get to Dipper and Comet, you can take either the Upper Dipper return or Lower Dipper return. I definitely recommend Upper Dipper return over Lower Dipper return, as Lower Dipper return is very flat and Upper Dipper return allows you to maintain some speed, which is required for the flat section towards the bottom of Dipper. Up above here, the Dipper Comet pod is essentially like the Sky Canyon pod of the Nevada side. A huge positive to this pod is that unlike Sky, Dipper is not the only way of getting back to California from Nevada, so even if that lift goes down for windhold, which it does semi-frequently, as long as Comet and or Tamarack are still open, you'll definitely still be able to get back to California. In general, while the groomers here aren't as scenic as their counterparts on the California side, they're still equally good in terms of length, snow quality, and cruisiness, if you will. We'll start with looking at Comet. Comet, like Canyon on the California side, is essentially just a reliever lift for Dipper, as backwards as it may sound. Believe it or not, Comet is older than Dipper. The difference between the two is that a lot of Comet's terrain is pretty much exclusively accessible from Comet itself and not Dipper. Technically, you can access Comet's terrain from Dipper, but that would require you to take the horrendous Sand Dunes Trail, which goes uphill. The dynamic of distributing crowds between Comet and Dipper is a lot better than over at the Sky Canyon pod. Because of this, I always like starting the morning in California when the lines from Sky aren't as bad, and then working my way over to Nevada where the crowd flow is overall a bit better. Comet is the signature trail that's serviced by Comet Express and is another very fun wide open cruiser. About a quarter of the way down the trail you'll come to a fork. If you turn right, you'll continue down Comet. If you continue straight, you'll merge onto the flat crossover trail, which previously mentioned is one of 3 ways of getting back to Olympic and down to the Nevada base. Crossover itself is very flat in several spots, but isn't too bad since it's not all that long. Going back to the second half of Comet, the trail widens significantly from here on out. I love dipping in and out of the trees skiers left of the run. Little Dipper is like the premier tree cut bump run in the pod, and yard sales are a near daily occurrence here. Ares is a small connector trail that leads from the top of Comet to Cosmic Wave and Orion, which we'll talk about shortly. Ares Woods is a pretty fun gladed area, however, since it's right next to the chairlift, it tends to get tracked out pretty quickly. We talked about this in part B, but even though it's in the Tamarack pod, 49er is most accessible from Comet. Now we'll talk about one of the best lifts on this side of the mountain, Dipper. Like I mentioned previously, Dipper is kind of like the Sky Express of the Nevada side. It definitely generates significant lines, but these lines aren't as bad as the lines that Sky builds up. Let's first talk about getting to Dipper from California. As we previously discussed, the only way to get to Nevada from the Sky Canyon pod is to ride Sky and then take the Skyline Trail all the way. The Skyline Trail eventually does a U-turn and merges onto Big Dipper. Big Dipper is definitely the signature cruiser in the Dipper pod. Like Comet, Big Dipper is very wide open and very popular and generally has pretty good snow quality until later on in the day. Dipper Line and Dipper Bowl are two steep bump runs with a natural feel. Dipper Line is essentially a narrow bumped up gully and Dipper Bowl is a bit more wide open. Both runs get decently steep but don't really maintain their pitch for that long. Both runs also merge back onto Big Dipper, although it doesn't really look like this is the case on the trail map. The bottom half of Big Dipper is a bit confusing as there are two paths. The skier's left path will take you onto lower half of Orion. The skier's right path will take you towards Upper Perimeter. Be careful with Upper Perimeter, since if you take it all the way, you'll end up in the Galaxy pod. For reasons discussed previously, I'd avoid doing this at all cost. As we talked about earlier, take Upper Dipper Return to get back to the bottom of Dipper and Comet. Know that getting to Comet from Upper Dipper Return requires a bit of additional catwalking. If you continue to take Upper Perimeter Trail but cut skiers left before entering the Galaxy pod, you'll find the unmarked top section of the Nevada Trail that goes around the looker's left side of East Peak Lake. This is the second way to get back down to Lower Nevada from Upper Nevada. It's definitely pretty flat in some spots but is overall doable. Orion is the other groomed cruiser in this pod and is very similar to Big Dipper, although I do like it slightly more than Big Dipper since it's even wider. Cosmic Wave is a very narrow, ungroomed intermediate run that you shouldn't know existed unless you looked at the trail map. It's really fun to dip in and out of Cosmic Wave and fly back onto Orion. The bottom of Orion presents three distinct paths. Just continuing down Orion is the most popular path. Jax is a typically groomed alternative to Lower Orion that's slightly less busy. Nova is the most hidden of the three, as you have to cut skiers right into the trees at the right time to find a really cool bump run that both Upper and Lower Dipper Return filter onto. From the top of Dipper, if you turn right, you'll be on the California Trail, which you can take all the way back to the bottom of Sky and Canyon. If you turn left, there's an unmarked path that I like to call the Skyline Trail Connector. The Skyline Trail Connector merges onto the lower half of the Skyline Trail, which is used to access the remaining runs lookers left of Dipper Express. Dipper Woods is accessed off the last few feet of the Skyline Trail. It has the same problem as Aries Woods, being located right next to the lift. However, I find that Dipper Woods gets tracked out less than Aries Woods. Just a little bit beyond Dipper Woods is Meteor. Meteor is another solid intermediate bump run to try out when you're first getting into bumps. Milky Way is one of the better bump runs at the resort since it's very wide open and feels different from the others. The only downside to Milky Way is that the part of the run that's located around the entrances of gates 4 and 5 of Mott Canyon is a bit uphill, so retain your speed as much as possible. Finally, we get to Milky Way Bowl, which is one of my favorite trails on the Nevada side outside of the Mott and Killebrew Canyon zones. About half of the bowl is lift accessible, and the remainder requires further hiking to the top of Monument Peak. The trail map makes it seem that you can access a bigger portion of Milky Way Bowl by taking the Skyline Trail from Sky Express than Dipper Express. However, this is not really true. Dipper Express, via the Skyline Trail Connector, actually allows you to access the same portion of Milky Way Bowl that Sky Express allows you to do. The trick is to stay as far skiers right on the Skyline Trail Connector as possible. It's a bit hard to explain through narration, so hopefully the footage I'm playing helps a bit. Milky Way Bowl itself is the only bowl terrain at the resort, although it's still very lightly graded in some spots. The run is short, but is definitely worth checking out at least once if you're advanced. We'll talk a bit more about getting to Milky Way Bowl from Sky Express in the next part. Moving back down to the bottom of Dipper, the final way to get down to the Nevada base is to traverse around the looker's right side of East Peak Lake. This traverse is even flatter than the looker's left traverse, and it's probably my least favorite way of getting down to Lower Nevada. Even though this approach doesn't require an additional lift ride, I'd highly recommend taking either Dipper to Upper Perimeter Trail to the looker's left traverse around the lake, or taking Comet to Crossover. Between those two, I'd say Crossover is the marginally better way of getting down to Lower Nevada. Well, that's actually not quite it for the Nevada side. Go check out Part D now, all about the rest of the Nevada side. Or go watch Parts A and B if you haven't already, all about the California side. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.